So I'm gonna try something. Never done anything like this before with like an image capture kind of thing, but I'm gonna see how it goes. And I'm creating this. I created this diagram that you will be able to see. It's kind of a illustration of what I believe, kind of the way the world, or at least society, works in terms of worldviews. Uh, And so we'll begin from the beginning. I personally believe that everyone begins the world, they come into existence at a point of agnosticism. Atheists, and at least also a decent number of theists, would challenge me on that, saying that everyone comes into the world believing that they are an atheist or not believing in God, and that only through like emotional delusion or some other thing would they change their opinion about that. I would challenge them to say that I believe that everyone comes into the world lacking knowledge, because we're all born with literally no experience, no education, no anything, and that we move from that point of lack into a point of knowledge. So you would begin from ignorance to knowledge. Now, atheists and agnostics and theists tend to disqualify each other's definition of what knowledge is, but literally knowledge just means to know something. And to say that theists, for instance, don't know anything is not only incredibly false, but it is also incredibly uncharitable. Their interpretation of relevant facts may be questionable, but there's the fact that facts do definitely exist and that theists are capable of knowing them is uncontestable. So getting that out of the way, say that we begin from a point of excellent. Once a person actually begins to develop a worldview, they then go into a point of confidence in ignorance. That's essentially what agnosticism is. I am certain that I don't know. Maybe even that some of them take to the extension of I am certain that nobody can know, which is an absolute statement, and so kind of self-refuting nevertheless. So that puts them in a position of increasing knowledge. If they choose not to and they remain agnostic, I'd say that that's kind of a demonstration of cowardice, fear of pursuing the truth to find out what's on the other side of it. But I'd say a lot of people that even they're residing in churches of any age actually would classify themselves either as agnostic or in the horizontal movement of deist. I'll get to that in a minute. So you have a binary choice, essentially. You either go from agnosticism, you would go towards theism, or you would go towards atheism. The belief in God, belief that there is no God. And in the process, you would acquire new facts, or you would acquire new information at the very least, that would lend towards one or both of those conclusions. And the reason why it's a triangle with a bridge across it is that at any point a person can intentionally go towards the idea of, say, theism, and abandon that due to kind of confrontation with a various, maybe a fact or a piece of information or a scholarly review or any number of other stimuli, can encounter that and choose instead to move towards the opposite direction. You could say that, well, anyone that starts off with theist will eventually end up in theism if given facts, but that's not necessarily true. It's not observably true, and it's also incredibly uncharitable, I would say, as well. But in between, right, splitting down the middle of each one of those pathways towards theism, towards atheism, would be considered agnostic variations of them, where if a person chooses to, in their process of accumulating new facts and information, they can simply say, yeah, maybe God does exist, but I don't know, and continue with the idea of that either I don't know or that nobody knows. Same thing with atheism. I'd say that this also constitutes a point of kind of cowardly stoppage, that person just simply, well, I've got enough to be at ease with, like, maybe my moral worldview or my political stance on this or that, and I don't need or desire more information to continue operating in daily life, and so I'm fine. Now, if you continue, you would go from continuing in confidence and knowledge towards theism, but let's say you are confident due to the result of nature and the experiences that we have with various kind of metaphysical and non-empirical objects, mathematical values, the present value of aesthetic, or various things that we encounter. Decide what there may be or there is an undeniable design element to the world around us, to the patterns in nature and things. So maybe there's an intentional or intelligent design, but it's by a God who created everything and then set it into motion and has now withdrawn himself. That's essentially deism. God exists, he's unknowable, or he is uninteractable, or non-interactive. If that's the case, you would be a deist. And it literally splits the road between atheism and theism there. It's kind of a bridge between, because I'd say that most people that are, or that would classify themselves as theist, actually, if you dig down into what they really believe, they're more in the area of moral therapeutic deist, where the emotional or the psychological kind of massage that comes from believing in a higher power helps them emotionally to deal with stress and trauma, that it explains the existence of non-objective or of non-empirical objects, but they wouldn't say that maybe heaven or hell are real. They wouldn't suggest that there's an eternal life. Maybe they would deny a lot of things that are essentially theist, so they're not truly theists. They're just morally therapeutic deists. A lot of atheists, I think, as well, would fall into this, where they would say, well, in order to justify morality, objective morality, or in order to stave off the unending kind of pitiless indifference that atheism kind of lends itself towards, the meaninglessness of life that philosophers have remarked upon for decades, they will kind of assent towards patterns and in society and in nature, without going so far as saying that it is God that created them, or is the source. Or they might even assert things like the universe or nature, maybe even with like a capital N, the way some atheist philosophers and things will, and in some ways kind of partially deify those objects in their own right. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. You can disagree if you want. I would love to get some feedback on it anyways.